This is the Solid Signal podcast for the week of April 25th, 2022. And the subject for this week's podcast, I'm calling the title Time Means Nothing. And I think that it will make more sense. I'll explain it when you get a little bit further into the podcast, but I need to come at it from a kind of a relatively sideways position. This is going to be one of those podcasts which is a bit off topic. But I hope you enjoy it. They do seem to be the ones that get the most listeners anyway. So this weekend, I watched the new film, The Batman. It was just available on streaming this week on HBO Max. And I will say the best review I have read of it said it was a great hour-and-a-half film, but unfortunately it's 3 hours long. And I have to agree. There are some really, really positive, glowing reviews of this film out there, and I don't really agree with them. I do think there's a lot of good stuff in this film, and it's a very interesting take on the character, which hasn't been done before. I'm very glad that they didn't go all the way back to the beginning, but they kind of started when Bruce Wayne he's getting into the Batman, but he hasn't really decided what the Batman really is. And the thing about this film is that it's just too much of a good thing. It just goes on and on and on and on. It really, in a lot of ways, would have been better as a 2-hour film or as a 6-episode mini series or something like that. I am not the biggest fan of it. I do think that there are some structural flaws there, but I will say that the performances, the characterizations are better than any other Batman film. But this really isn't a movie review. The point is that The Batman is an overlong film at a little bit under 3 hours. And yet, you can sit there and binge something like Russian Doll, the entire series, season 2, in about something about 3.5, almost 4 hours, I think. Lost track of time, to be real honest with you. And that seems short. So how is it that a 4-hour time commitment is acceptable and a 3-hour time commitment isn't? Because time means nothing. The thing about The Batman and other 3-hour long films is they seem like a single commitment without a respite. There's no place for you to really decide if you're ready to step off or if you want to keep going. It takes away your agency, is what people tend to say. And that's what makes it feel very long. There aren't these stopping points where you feel some closure, like you can breathe for a minute, and then you can decide if you're going to keep binging, which most folks are going to do. On the other hand, when you have this kind of episodic thing, whether it's, a 30-minute episode or hour-long episode or whatever, it's structured in such a way that you feel like there are concrete stopping points. It gives you back control. And whether or not you choose to cede that control and just watch another episode because you didn't touch the remote, that's fine. That's up to you. That's your decision. But a film like The Batman holds you, keeps you, as it were, and leaves you with that lingering feeling of a lack of closure if you do decide to stop it in the middle. That's kind of the problem with it. I'm a sort of a person who will sit down and watch, 3 movies in a row, or for example, I sat down and watched the entirety of the Lord of the Rings extended edition. Oh, come on, don't judge me. You've thought about doing it yourself. And that's like a 9-hour commitment. And yet I didn't really sense that seemed too long because it was a series of short adventures that had stopping points built into it. Even the film versions of The Lord of the Rings have had kind of stopping points built into them. My biggest criticism of The Batman and of a lot of films of that length is that you just don't know when to stop. I wish that, I could explain a little bit more, but I guess in the end, the point is that time means nothing. It's not the absolute running time of something. It's what you do with it. It's how it's structured. It's how it makes sense. And that's one of the reasons that I tend to do shorter podcasts, by the way. A lot of people will do a 30 to 40 minute podcast, but I don't. I tend to do, between a 5 and a 10-minute podcast, and that gives you the decision whether or not you want to listen to another one, if you want to kind of binge them. There are well over 400 of them available on our YouTube channel, by the way. I don't keep that many on Spotify or whatever because it's there's costs associated with that sort of thing, and most people do not go back and binge podcasts from 3 years ago or 8 years ago or whenever I started doing it. Time means nothing, as I said. But you can just keep watching and listening and watching and listening if you really want to do that. That's up to you. I've given you the agency. I've given you the choice. Anyway, this particular podcast is not particularly long. I guess I'm stung by the overlong run length of the Batman, and I don't want to ramble on at the mouth. So I'll just cut off by saying thank you again for listening. Please like and subscribe. As I always say, makes me look good to my bosses. Leave a comment anywhere you get this podcast, and I will see you again next week.